This is VeriScope News, verified data, clear context. Today we are covering the Weekly Petroleum Status Report released by the U.S. Energy Information Administration. The report was issued at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. It covers petroleum supply and inventory data for the week ending February 20th, 2026. All figures in this report are published by the U.S. Energy Information Administration. All inventory values are stated in millions of barrels. This report focuses on U.S. commercial crude oil inventories excluding the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The data reflects conditions for one reporting week. No revisions to the prior week's inventory level were stated in the release summary. No interpretation was included in the official publication. This report is part of the federal government's regular energy data schedule. It provides weekly measurements of crude oil stocks and related petroleum balances. These figures are used by analysts, businesses, and institutions to monitor energy supply conditions. This coverage presents the reported data, the numerical change, and the structural context of what the report measures. All statements in this segment are based on the published release. No projections are included. No forecasts are presented. The focus is the reported figures and the institutional process behind them. We begin with the headline number. The U.S. Energy Information Administration reported that U.S. commercial crude oil inventories, excluding the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, stood at 435.8 million barrels for the week ending February 20th, 2026. The previous week's level was 419.8 million barrels. The numerical difference between the 2 weeks was 16.0 million barrels. The calculation is direct. 435.8 million barrels minus 419.8 million barrels equals 16.0 million barrels. No revision to the prior week's figure was noted in the release summary. The report presents these values without interpretation. Commercial crude oil inventories refer to oil held in storage by private industry for commercial use. These figures exclude barrels held in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is a federally owned emergency stockpile. The commercial inventory figure reflects oil stored in tanks, pipelines, and terminals across the United States. The Weekly Petroleum Status Report is issued on a fixed schedule. It measures supply, imports, refinery activity, and storage levels. The crude oil inventory number is one of the most closely followed components of the report. The weekly change is calculated by comparing the reported total with the previous week's total. In this case, inventories increased by 16.0 million barrels. All values are stated in millions of barrels. The data is compiled from surveys of refiners, storage operators, and other petroleum market participants. The EIA aggregates the data and publishes it in standardized form. The report does not provide narrative explanation. It provides measured values and weekly differences. This week's release reflects storage conditions at the close of the reporting period. The figure represents the total amount of crude oil held in commercial storage across the country at that time. The numerical increase is measured strictly from the prior week's level. No adjustment or revision to the earlier number was announced in the release summary. This establishes the baseline for understanding the weekly movement. The 16.0 million barrel increase is the central change reported for this release. The key development in this report is the increase in U.S. commercial crude oil inventories from 419.8 million barrels to 435.8 million barrels. This represents a weekly increase of 16.0 million barrels. The Weekly Petroleum Status Report provides a snapshot of supply conditions during the reporting week. Crude oil inventories rise when incoming supply exceeds refinery demand and other withdrawals. Crude oil inventories decline when refinery inputs and other withdrawals exceed incoming supply. The report does not attribute the change to a specific cause. It records the measured outcome. Commercial crude inventories include oil stored at refineries, tank farms, and pipeline systems. They reflect oil available for processing or resale in the commercial market. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is excluded from this figure. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is managed separately by the federal government. The reported total of 435.8 million barrels reflects commercial holdings only. The 16.0 million barrel increase is calculated through direct subtraction. The EIA collects data through mandatory reporting requirements. Companies submit weekly information regarding production, imports, refinery runs, and storage. The EIA compiles and verifies these submissions before publication. The resulting inventory number is a balance of supply and demand factors during that week. When inventories rise, it means more oil was added to storage than removed during the reporting period. The report does not specify how much of the change was due to domestic production. It does not break down the weekly inventory change into separate explanatory categories in the summary text provided here. The number stands as a measured result. Weekly changes can vary in size. This week's change was 16.0 million barrels. All values are presented in millions of barrels. The report does not provide commentary on historical comparisons within the summary excerpt provided. It does not compare the level to multi-year averages in this text. It provides the total and the weekly difference. The figure of 435.8 million barrels represents the total stored amount across commercial facilities at the end of the reporting week. The prior week's level of 419.8 million barrels serves as the comparison base. The arithmetic difference is 16.0 million barrels. No correction to the previous week's number was noted in the release summary. The report covers petroleum supply and inventory data nationwide. It is published on a regular weekly schedule. It is part of a standardized federal statistical release. The increase indicates that the balance of flows during the week resulted in additional storage accumulation. The report does not attribute motive or cause. It provides measurement. The value of 435.8 million barrels represents the total stored amount across commercial facilities. The weekly increase is the reported change in that total. The release does not include qualitative analysis. It provides quantitative reporting. The data is publicly available and widely distributed. Institutions use the reported figures as a factual reference point. The numbers are not estimates in narrative form. They are compiled survey results. The change is calculated as a simple difference between two published totals. The 16.0 million barrel increase is the headline movement for this reporting week. The Weekly Petroleum Status Report is one of the most frequently released energy reports in the United States. It is issued by the U.S. Energy Information Administration. The EIA operates within the Department of Energy. Its role is to collect, analyze, and disseminate energy information. The weekly report provides timely updates on petroleum supply conditions. Crude oil inventories are a key component of this report. Commercial crude oil inventories reflect oil stored for market use. These inventories do not include the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is intended for emergency supply disruptions. Commercial inventories are influenced by production, imports, exports, and refinery activity. When domestic production increases, inventories may rise if refinery demand does not increase at the same pace. When imports increase, inventories may also rise if demand remains stable. When refineries process more crude oil, inventories may decline if supply inflows remain constant. The report itself does not analyze these dynamics in the summary text provided here. It records measured outcomes. Weekly data is collected through standardized forms. Refiners and storage operators submit data. The EIA aggregates their responses. The reported number represents the compiled total. All values are stated in millions of barrels. The reported figure of 435.8 million barrels reflects national commercial storage at the close of the reporting week. The prior week's level of 419.8 million barrels serves as the comparison base. The arithmetic difference is 16.0 million barrels. No correction to the previous week's number was noted in the release summary. The absence of revision means the comparison uses the previously published value without change. Inventory data is commonly tracked because it reflects supply balance conditions. It provides a measurable indicator of how much crude oil is stored within commercial systems. The data does not include refined products in this specific figure. It refers specifically to crude oil inventories. The report covers the week ending February 20th, 2026. The release time was 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. The report is part of a recurring weekly publication schedule. Each weekly report follows a similar format. It presents updated figures for inventories and other petroleum metrics. The inventory level represents physical barrels in storage. The weekly change represents the net difference between supply inflows and withdrawals during that period. The EIA's methodology is consistent across reporting periods. This allows weekly comparisons using standardized definitions. The report does not include projections. It does not provide forward-looking statements. It documents measured quantities. The 16.0 million barrel increase is derived from the subtraction of 419.8 from 435.8. The arithmetic is direct. The numbers are presented without interpretation. This establishes the structural context for the reported change. Households. Commercial crude oil inventory levels can influence downstream fuel markets through supply availability. Crude oil is the primary input for gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and other refined products. Refineries purchase crude oil from commercial storage. When commercial inventories increase, it means more crude oil is available within storage facilities. The report does not indicate retail fuel price changes. It does not provide pricing data. It reports storage levels. Households interact with petroleum markets primarily through gasoline and heating fuel purchases. Changes in crude inventories reflect supply conditions upstream in the production and refining chain. The 16.0 million barrel increase represents additional crude oil stored during the week. The report does not link this change to immediate consumer outcomes. It presents measured storage data. Fuel pricing involves multiple components, including crude costs, refining costs, distribution costs, and taxes. The inventory figure represents only one structural component of the broader energy system. The reported number indicates the commercial crude oil stocks stood at 435.8 million barrels. That figure is the total measured storage volume at the close of the reporting week. Households rely on refined products that originate from crude oil processing. The inventory level reflects crude oil availability before refining. The report does not state how refineries adjusted operations during the week. It does not provide household spending data. It provides inventory totals. Prices. The Weekly Petroleum Status Report does not include retail price data in this summary. It reports physical storage volumes. Crude oil inventories are one input into price formation in energy markets. Market participants review inventory data as part of supply assessment. The 16.0 million barrel increase represents a measured expansion in stored crude supply. The report does not state price effects. Price formation occurs in commodity markets where crude oil contracts are traded. Inventory levels are considered among multiple supply indicators. The report does not evaluate whether the level is high or low relative to historical averages in the provided excerpt. It states the current level and the weekly difference. The figure of 435.8 million barrels represents total commercial stocks. The change from 419.8 million barrels is 16.0 million barrels. The report remains quantitative. It does not provide qualitative evaluation. Jobs. The Weekly Petroleum Status Report does not provide employment figures. It does not measure labor conditions. It focuses on physical petroleum supply metrics. Energy sector employment includes upstream production, midstream transportation, and downstream refining. Inventory data reflects supply balance within that system. The reported increase indicates that net supply exceeded withdrawals during the reporting week. The report does not indicate changes in drilling activity. It does not include workforce statistics. It reports commercial crude oil stocks at 435.8 million barrels. The employment impact of inventory changes is not addressed in the release. The document remains statistical in nature. Savings. Household savings are not measured in the Weekly Petroleum Status Report. The report does not include consumer finance data. Energy expenditures can influence household budgets. Crude oil inventories reflect supply available for refining. The report does not state changes in energy spending. It presents inventory data only. The 16.0 million barrel increase is a storage measurement. It does not provide financial analysis. Savings rates are reported in separate federal economic releases. This report remains focused on petroleum supply. Businesses. Businesses involved in energy production, refining, transportation, and storage use inventory data as operational reference. The reported level of 435.8 million barrels indicates total commercial crude oil stocks at the end of the week. The increase of 16.0 million barrels indicates net additions to storage during the reporting period. Refineries draw from commercial inventories for processing. Pipeline operators manage transportation flows between storage hubs and refineries. Producers supply crude oil into the system. The Weekly Petroleum Status Report provides a standardized weekly measurement of these balances. The report does not provide business revenue figures. It does not provide profit data. It provides inventory totals. The inventory figure reflects aggregate storage conditions across commercial facilities. The absence of revision to the prior week's level ensures continuity in comparison. Businesses reviewing the report rely on the consistency of definitions and reporting schedules. The data supports supply chain planning. The 435.8 million barrel total represents physical barrels in storage. The 16.0 million barrel change represents net additions for the week ending February 20, 2026. The report maintains neutral presentation. It does not provide forward guidance. It does not forecast production or consumption trends. It documents measured supply levels. Energy analysts review subsequent weekly releases for changes in inventory direction and magnitude. Each weekly petroleum status report provides an updated measurement. The next report will present a new total for commercial crude oil inventories. Analysts compare weekly changes using consistent definitions. The current reported level is 435.8 million barrels. The weekly increase was 16.0 million barrels. Future reports will indicate whether inventories rise, fall, or remain stable. The report does not provide expectations. It does not provide forecasts. It provides measurement. The increase reflects net additions to commercial crude oil storage during the reporting week. The figures are compiled and published by the U.S. Energy Information Administration. All values are stated in millions of barrels. This information contributes to the broader understanding of U.S. energy supply conditions. The data is part of a standardized federal statistical release. The reported total of 435.8 million barrels now serves as the reference point for the next weekly report. The Weekly Petroleum Status Report is compiled by the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Data is collected through required surveys of petroleum industry participants. Respondents include refiners, storage operators, and other commercial entities. The EIA aggregates submitted data and verifies totals. Commercial crude oil inventories exclude the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. All inventory values are reported in millions of barrels. The weekly change is calculated by subtracting the prior week's total from the current week's total. In this case, 435.8 minus 419.8 equals 16.0 million barrels. No revision to the prior week's level was indicated in the summary provided. The data reflects storage conditions at the close of the reporting week. Publication time was 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. The report follows a consistent weekly release schedule. This has been VeriScope News. The U.S. Energy Information Administration reported that commercial crude oil inventories, excluding the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, stood at 435.8 million barrels for the week ending February 20, 2026. The previous week's level was 419.8 million barrels. The weekly increase was 16.0 million barrels. All figures were published at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. No revision to the prior week's total was stated. The report provides measured supply data. No interpretation was included in the release summary. We will continue to present verified federal data as published. Verified data, clear context.